As the gallows were raised, the Duke whispered, "Bring the priest." What followed silenced the entire crowd. I was not supposed to die that day. The noose around my neck was meant for the woman beside me, the accused witch who stood trembling in the morning mist, her wrists bound so tightly the rope had cut into her flesh. But when the magistrate read her sentence, when the crowd began to bay for blood, I did something I had sworn never to do again after my brother's death. I told the truth. "She is innocent," I said, my voice cutting through the mob's fever. "And I can prove it, but you must give me 1 hour. Bring the priest. Bring Father Nathaniel, and I will show you all the real monster among us." The crowd fell silent. The magistrate stared. And the woman, God, the woman looked at me as though I had offered her the moon itself. She did not know that in saving her, I was condemning myself to something far worse than death. Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. My name is Dorian Blackwell, 8th Duke of Ashmore, and I had not set foot in the village of Thornfield for 3 years, not since the trial that ended with my brother swinging from these very same gallows, convicted of a murder he did not commit. I had watched him die, unable to save him, paralyzed by cowardice and the fear of losing everything I had built. My reputation, my estates, my carefully constructed life of isolation and self-preservation. I had sworn that day, as they cut his body down, that I would never return to this cursed place, that I would never again stand by while injustice wore the mask of law. And yet here I stood, 3 years later, on the same platform where my brother had taken his last breath. Only this time I was not watching from the crowd. This time I was standing in the place of the condemned. The woman beside me was called Isabeau Thorne, a name that had become synonymous with darkness in Thornfield over the past month. They said she had poisoned the village well, that she had caused the livestock to sicken and die, that she had been seen dancing naked under the full moon, communing with demons and speaking in tongues no Christian should know. All lies, of course, but lies spoken loudly enough become truth to those who wish to believe them. I had arrived in Thornfield the previous evening, drawn by a letter from Father Nathaniel, the village priest who had been my tutor in childhood. His message had been brief but urgent. "Come at once. An innocent will die unless you intervene. She knows the truth about Edmund." Edmund, my brother, dead these 3 years, his name still a wound that would not heal. So I had come, and I had learned in the span of a single night that everything I thought I knew about my brother's death was a lie, that the real killer walked free, respected and feared, and that Isabeau Thorne was the only witness who could prove it. She had not known who I was when they brought her to the gallows that morning, had not known that the tall, dark-haired man in the fine coat who pushed through the crowd was the brother of the man whose murder she had witnessed. She knew only that she was going to die for crimes she had not committed, condemned by a magistrate who refused to hear her testimony. But I knew, and I could not, would not stand by again. "Your Grace," the magistrate sputtered, his jowls quivering with indignation, "you cannot simply interrupt a lawful execution with such wild claims." "This woman has been tried and convicted by a jury of her peers. A jury of frightened farmers who have been told that sickness and misfortune are the work of witchcraft rather than poor sanitation and bad luck," I interrupted coldly. A jury that never heard her side of the story because you, Magistrate Pemberton, refused to allow her to speak in her own defense. The crowd murmured, a low susurrus of uncertainty. Pemberton's face turned an ugly shade of purple. "How dare you?" "I dare because I am a duke and my rank affords me certain privileges, including the right to demand that you hear evidence before you commit murder in the name of justice." I turned to face the crowd, my voice rising. 3 years ago, my brother Edmund was hanged in this very spot, convicted of murdering Thomas Ashford, the blacksmith's son. I did nothing to save him. I let him die because I was afraid of scandal, afraid of losing my position, afraid of what it would cost me to stand up for truth. I paused, letting my shame hang in the air like morning mist. I will not make that mistake again. This woman knows who really killed Thomas Ashford, and if you hang her today, you will be executing the only person who can prove my brother's innocence. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Isabeau Thorne turned to look at me, her dark eyes wide with shock, and something I could not quite name. "You are Edmund's brother," she whispered. "I am, and I am sorry, so desperately sorry, that I did not save him when I had the chance. But I will save you, I swear it." Pemberton was sputtering again, but I ignored him. "Bring Father Nathaniel," I commanded. "Let him tell you what he knows. Let him explain why this woman is the key to the truth you have all been too cowardly to face." For a moment, I thought they would refuse. That Pemberton would order the hangman to proceed, and we would both die on this platform while the crowd watched and did nothing. But then a voice rang out from the back of the assembly. "I am here, my son." Father Nathaniel emerged from the crowd, his white hair gleaming in the morning sun, his face lined with 70 years of bearing witness to human cruelty and grace in equal measure. He climbed the steps to the gallows slowly, leaning heavily on his walking stick until he stood between Isabeau and me. "Your grace speaks the truth," the priest said, his voice carrying across the square. "And I will tell you all exactly what happened 3 years ago. But first," he turned to the magistrate, "remove the nooses. You will not hang these two before you have heard the full story." "This is highly irregular," Pemberton began. "Then let it be irregular," Father Nathaniel said sharply. "I have been priest to this village for 40 years. I have baptized most of you, married you, buried your dead. And I am telling you now, if you hang Isabeau Thorne, you will have innocent blood on your hands, just as you did when you hanged Edmund Blackwell." The crowd erupted in a cacophony of voices, some demanding we be heard, others calling for immediate execution. But slowly, grudgingly, Pemberton gestured to the hangman to remove our nooses. I felt the rough hemp slide from my throat and drew the first full breath I had taken since mounting the scaffold. Beside me, Isabeau sagged with relief, and I caught her before she fell. "I have you," I murmured. "You are safe now." "Am I?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Or have you merely delayed the inevitable?" "We shall see," I said. And then to Father Nathaniel, tell them everything." The priest's story unfolded like a map to buried treasure, or buried guilt, depending on one's perspective. 3 years ago, Thomas Ashford had been found dead in the woods, his skull crushed by what appeared to be a heavy blow. He had been popular in the village, young, strong, handsome, with a bright future as the blacksmith's heir. His death had shocked everyone. The magistrate had arrested my brother Edmund almost immediately. Edmund had been drinking at the tavern that night. He had argued with Thomas over a gambling debt, and he had been seen walking toward the woods around the time of the murder. The evidence had been circumstantial but damning. Edmund had sworn his innocence, had begged the magistrate to investigate further. But Pemberton had been eager to close the case quickly, to show the village that justice was swift and certain. Edmund had hanged within a week of his arrest. But Edmund was innocent, Father Nathaniel said, his voice heavy with sorrow. And the true killer has walked free these 3 years, protected by fear and silence. "Then name him," someone shouted from the crowd. "If you know who killed Thomas Ashford, name him now." The priest turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the assembly until it settled on a figure standing at the edge of the square, a tall man with broad shoulders and cold blue eyes. "Barnabas Ashford," Father Nathaniel said quietly. "Thomas's own brother. You killed him, did you not?" The crowd gasped. Barnabas, now the village blacksmith, having inherited the forge after his brother's death, went very still. "That is a lie," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" The priest's gaze did not waver. "Then perhaps you can explain why Isabeau Thorne saw you in the woods that night, why she watched you strike your brother down and leave him for dead. Why she tried to tell the magistrate what she had witnessed, only to be threatened into silence. She is a liar, a witch. She is neither. She is simply a woman who had the misfortune to see something she should not have seen. And you have spent 3 years destroying her reputation, turning the village against her, ensuring that no one would believe her if she ever spoke the truth." Father Nathaniel's voice grew stronger, more forceful. "You started the rumors about the poisoned well after Isabeau told me what she had witnessed. You spread lies about witchcraft and dark magic, knowing the village would be quick to believe them. And when I threatened to reveal the truth, you ensured that she would be arrested and tried before I could intervene. Why?" The question came from somewhere in the crowd, a woman's voice choked with emotion. "Why would you kill your own brother?" Barnabas said nothing, but in his silence I saw the confirmation of his guilt. "Jealousy," I said, understanding suddenly. "Thomas was everything you were not, beloved, talented, the pride of your father, and you could not bear to live in his shadow." "He mocked me," Barnabas said suddenly, his composure cracking. "He laughed at me, told me I would never be half the smith he was, that our father loved him more, trusted him more, that I was nothing but a disappointment. So you killed him," Isabeau said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You crushed his skull with a forge hammer and left him in the woods to die. And when they arrested an innocent man, you said nothing. You let Edmund Blackwell hang for your crime. And then you tried to silence the only witness," I added, my voice hard as steel, "by turning her into a monster in the eyes of the village, by ensuring that anything she said would be dismissed as the ravings of a witch." Barnabas looked around at the crowd, at the faces that had once respected him, and saw only accusation and disgust. "What will you do?" he asked finally, his voice empty. "Hang me as you hanged Edmund Blackwell? Will that bring either of them back?" "No," I said, "but it will ensure that justice is finally done, that my brother's name is cleared." That Isabeau Thorne is freed from the shadow you cast over her life. Magistrate Pemberton, who had been silent throughout Father Nathaniel's revelation, finally spoke. His voice was subdued, almost ashamed. "Barnabas Ashford, You are under arrest for the murder of Thomas Ashford and for bearing false witness against Edmund Blackwell. You will be tried fairly." He glanced at me. "And if convicted, you will face the punishment you have long evaded." Two men from the crowd stepped forward to seize Barnabas. He did not resist. As they led him away, he looked back once at Isabeau, and I saw in his eyes not remorse, but something darker. Rage at being caught, fury at being exposed. "She should still hang," he spat. "Witch or not, she should have kept her mouth shut." "And you," I said coldly, "should have been a better man. But we rarely get what we deserve in this life. You will simply have to content yourself with what you have earned." He was dragged away, and the crowd began to disperse, their bloodlust transformed into shame and confusion. Many would not meet my eyes. They knew they had been complicit in my brother's death, in Isabeau's persecution, and they would have to live with that knowledge. But that was their burden to bear, not mine. I turned to Isabeau, who stood trembling on the scaffold, her bound wrists still marked by the rope's cruel embrace. I removed my coat and draped it over her shoulders. A small gesture, but one that seemed to steady her. "Come," I said gently. "Let me take you somewhere safe." "Where?" she asked, her voice hollow. "They still hate me here. Even if I am not hanged, I cannot stay in Thornfield. The rumors will follow me, the accusations. I have nowhere to go." "Then come with me," I said, "to Ashmore. My estate is large enough that you can disappear if you wish, or visible enough that you can start anew, with my protection and my name vouching for your innocence." She looked at me with those dark, devastating eyes. "Why would you do that? You do not know me." "Because my brother would have wanted me to. Because Father Nathaniel asked me to. And because—" I paused, searching for words that would not sound insane or presumptuous. "Because something in me recognizes something in you. Two people who have been condemned by those who should have protected them. Perhaps we can protect each other." It was the same reasoning I had used with Seraphina, I realized, the same instinct that had driven me to dig her from that coffin. I seemed to have a talent for finding women on the brink of execution and inserting myself into their lives. Perhaps it was time I examined why. But Isabeau was nodding slowly, cautiously, as though afraid the offer might evaporate if she breathed too hard. "Very well, Your Grace. I will come with you, if only because I have nowhere else to go." "Then let us leave this place," I said, "before they find another reason to hate us." "Then let us leave this place," I said, "before they find another reason to hate us." We rode from Thornfield that same afternoon, Isabeau seated behind me on my horse, her arms wrapped around my waist for balance. She had said nothing since we left, had simply pressed her face against my back and held on as though I were the only solid thing in a world gone mad. Father Nathaniel had blessed us before we departed, pressing a small wooden cross into Isabeau's hands. "You have been tested beyond what most endure," he told her, "and you have not broken. That is grace, child. Remember it." "Thank you, Father," she whispered, "for believing me, for not abandoning me. I am sorry I did not act sooner, sorry that fear kept me silent when courage was required. But we can only move forward now. Make a good life for yourself, Isabeau. You have earned it." As we rode away from Thornfield, I felt the weight of 3 years of guilt and grief finally begin to lift. I had not saved Edmund, but I had saved Isabeau, and in doing so, I had finally done something that mattered. It was not redemption, not quite. But it was a beginning. We stopped at an inn for the night, a small establishment 20 miles from Thornfield where no one knew our names or our histories. I secured 2 rooms, one for Isabeau, one for myself, and ordered a meal brought up. Isabeau ate mechanically, as though food were fuel rather than pleasure. She had bathed and changed into a simple dress I had purchased from the innkeeper's wife, but she still looked haunted, her eyes distant and unfocused. "You are safe now," I told her gently. "Barnabas cannot hurt you anymore." "Can he not?" She set down her spoon and looked at me directly for the first time since we left Thornfield. "The villagers still believe I am a witch, Your Grace. Even with the truth revealed, they will cling to their suspicions. And she drew a shaky breath. "I do not know how to be anything other than afraid. I have lived under the shadow of death for so long that I do not remember what it feels like to simply exist." "Then we will remember together," I said. "You are not the only one who has forgotten how to live. Tell me about him, about Edmund." So I did. I told her about my brother, 7 years my junior, wild and reckless and full of laughter that could light up the darkest room. I told her how he had loved horses and hated mathematics, how he had once broken his arm trying to jump from the stable roof, how our father had despaired of him ever becoming a proper gentleman. "He was everything I was not," I said. "Brave where I was cautious, open where I was guarded. He made friends easily, loved freely, lived without fear of consequence. I envied him. And when he needed me most, when he begged me to help clear his name, I was too afraid to act." And he died for it. Isabeau reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were small and cold, but her grip was strong. "You are not a coward now," she said quietly. "You stood on those gallows and demanded justice. You risked everything to save a stranger. That is not the action of a coward. It is the action of a man trying desperately to atone for past failures. Then perhaps we are both seeking the same thing, a chance to become more than our worst moments." I squeezed her hand gently. "I would like that." We sat in silence for a while, hands linked across the table, 2 strangers bound by shared trauma and the fragile hope of something better. Finally, Isabeau spoke again. "What will happen to me at Ashmore? Will I be a servant, a guest, a charity case to salve your conscience? You will be whatever you wish to be. If you want to hide away and heal, you may do so. If you want to help manage the estate, I will find work for you. If you wish to leave once you have recovered, I will give you money and references to start anew elsewhere. The choice is yours, Isabeau. I am offering you freedom, not a gilded cage." She studied me for a long moment, as though trying to determine whether I was sincere. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. Then I choose to stay. For now, until I know what I want my life to become." "That seems wise. And, Your Grace." "Dorian. If we are to live under the same roof, you should call me Dorian." She smiled then, a small, tentative thing, but genuine. "Dorian. Thank you for everything." "You are welcome. Now eat. You are far too thin, and Mrs. Pemberton, my housekeeper, will have my head if I bring you home half-starved." She laughed, and the sound was like water over stones, hesitant and rusty from disuse, but beautiful nonetheless. Ashmore was everything Thornfield was not. Where the village had been cramped and suspicious, the estate was sprawling and open. Where Thornfield had smelled of fear and wood smoke, Ashmore smelled of roses and fresh-cut grass. And where the villagers had looked at Isabeau with hatred, my household staff looked at her with curiosity but no judgment. I had written ahead to Mrs. Pemberton, explaining the situation in the vaguest possible terms. A woman in need of sanctuary, temporarily under my protection, to be treated with courtesy and discretion. My housekeeper, bless her practical soul, had asked no questions. She had simply prepared the best guest room, aired the linens, and filled the vases with wildflowers. "Welcome to Ashmore, Miss Thorne," she said when we arrived. "His Grace has instructed me to make you comfortable. If there is anything you require, you need only ask." Isabeau looked around the entrance hall, at the soaring ceilings, the marble floors, the portraits of Blackwell's past staring down from gilded frames, and her expression was one of wonder tinged with wariness. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I have never seen anything like it." "It is home," I said, "or it was once. I have not spent much time here in recent years, but perhaps that will change." Mrs. Pemberton showed Isabeau to her room while I retreated to my study, suddenly exhausted by the weight of the past 2 days. I poured myself a whiskey and collapsed into the leather chair by the window, staring out at the estate I had inherited but never truly claimed. Ashmore had been in my family for 6 generations. My father had loved this place, had poured his heart into maintaining the lands, caring for the tenants, preserving the legacy. But after Edmund's death, I had found it impossible to stay. Every corner held memories of my brother, his laughter echoing in the halls, his muddy boots abandoned by the kitchen door, his horse still stabled and restless without its master. I had fled to London, then to Bath, then to a dozen other cities where I could lose myself in anonymity and gin. I had neglected the estate, left it in the capable hands of my steward, and tried desperately to forget that I had ever been a duke with responsibilities. But now, with Isabeau under my roof, and my brother's name finally cleared, I felt the first stirrings of something I had not felt in years. The desire to stay, to build, to become the man my father had hoped I would be. A knock at the door interrupted my brooding. "Come." Isabeau entered, looking small and uncertain in the vast space of my study. She had changed into a nightgown and robe Mrs. Pemberton must have provided, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, dark as midnight, falling in waves that caught the firelight. She was beautiful, I realized with a start. I had been so focused on saving her, on correcting my past failures, that I had not truly looked at her. But now, in the soft light of my study, I saw her clearly. Saw the strength in the set of her jaw, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the resilience that had carried her through hell and back. "I am sorry to disturb you," she said, "but I could not sleep. This room is so large, so quiet. I keep—" She broke off, shaking her head. "It does not matter. You keep expecting to wake in a cell," I finished gently. "Expecting the gallows to be waiting for you." "Yes. How did you know?" "Because I spent 3 years expecting to wake and find that Edmund's death was just a nightmare, that he would come bounding through the door, full of some new mischief. The mind plays cruel tricks on us after trauma." She crossed to the fireplace, holding her hands out to the flames. "Tell me it gets easier. Tell me the fear fades." "I cannot tell you that, because I am not certain it is true. But I can tell you that the fear becomes more manageable, that you learn to live alongside it rather than beneath it, and that having someone to talk to helps immeasurably." "Is that why you brought me here? So you would have someone who understands?" "Perhaps. I am not entirely certain of my own motivations. But I am glad you are here, Isabeau, for whatever reason." She turned to face me, and in her expression I saw the same confusion I felt, a tangle of gratitude and suspicion and something deeper, more dangerous. "I do not know how to thank you," she said finally. "You saved my life, cleared my name, brought me to this beautiful place, and I have nothing to offer you in return. I require nothing in return. Your safety is thanks enough. But why? Why do you care what happens to me?" I considered lying, considered offering some noble platitude about justice or duty, but she deserved the truth, uncomfortable as it was. "Because I see myself in you," I said quietly. someone condemned by forces beyond your control, someone abandoned by those who should have protected you, someone who deserved better than the hand fate dealt. And because saving you feels like, I paused, searching for the right words, like saving the part of myself that died with Edmund. She was quiet for a long time. Then she crossed the room and did something that shocked us both. She kissed me. It was not a passionate kiss, not the hungry embrace of lovers. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a declaration. Her lips were soft against mine, and she tasted of uncertainty and hope. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. "I am sorry. I shouldn't have." "Do not apologize," I said, my voice rough. "But Isabeau, you need to understand something. You have been through an ordeal. Your emotions are heightened, your judgment clouded by trauma and gratitude. I will not take advantage of that. I cannot. What if it is not gratitude? What if it is simply—" She struggled for words. "What if I simply want to feel something other than fear? Want to remember what it means to be human, to be alive? Then let me help you remember in ways that do not involve complications you may come to regret. Let me be your friend, your protector, your sanctuary. And when you have healed, when you can think clearly without the shadow of the gallows hanging over you, we can revisit this conversation. Can you accept that?" She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are right. I am sorry. I am not thinking clearly. You have nothing to apologize for. Now, go to bed, Isabel. Sleep if you can, and know that you are safe here. No one will hurt you under my roof." She left quietly, and I collapsed back into my chair, my heart racing like a startled bird. I had not lied to her. She was vulnerable, traumatized, in no position to make decisions about romance or entanglement. And I, God help me, was far too aware of my own capacity for self-deception to trust my motivations. Did I care for her? Yes. Did I find her beautiful? Undeniably. But was I capable of separating genuine affection from my desperate need to atone for Edmund's death? I did not know, and until I did, I would keep my distance, for both our sakes. The days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Isabel spent her mornings exploring the estate, walking the gardens, reading in the library. She spoke little at first, still wary, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. But slowly, gradually, she began to relax, to smile more freely, to ask questions about the estate, about my life, about the books I read and the music I enjoyed. Mrs. Pemberton took to her immediately, declaring that Isabel had a good, sensible head on her shoulders and far better manners than most of the gentry who came calling. The groundskeeper's children adored her, following her around like ducklings whenever she ventured outside. And I found myself looking forward to our evenings together, to the conversations we shared over dinner, to the way she would challenge my opinions on philosophy and literature, to the sound of her laughter when I said something particularly absurd. 3 weeks after her arrival, she found me in the stables, tending to Edmund's horse, a gray mare named Tempest, who had not been ridden since my brother's death. "She is beautiful," Isabeau said, approaching cautiously. "What is her name?" "Tempest. She was Edmund's. I could not bring myself to sell her, but I have not had the courage to ride her either." Isabeau reached out slowly, letting Tempest sniff her hand before stroking the mare's nose. "She misses him." "I know. Perhaps she would feel better if someone rode her, if she could run again instead of simply standing in this stable, waiting for a master who will never return." I looked at Isabeau, at the way Tempest nuzzled her palm, and felt something shift in my chest. "Can you ride?" "My father taught me when I was young, before he died, and my mother remarried a man who thought horses were too expensive to waste on a daughter." "Then ride her," I said impulsively. "Take Tempest out. Let her remember what it means to gallop across open fields. Are you certain? I am certain that Edmund would want his horse to be ridden by someone who understands loss, someone who knows what it means to be trapped and waiting for freedom. Isabeau's smile was radiant. Then I would be honored. We saddled Tempest together, and I watched as Isabeau mounted with the ease of someone who had indeed ridden before. She looked natural atop the mare, her dark hair streaming behind her, her posture straight and confident. "Where should I go?" she asked. "Anywhere, everywhere. The estate is yours to explore." She leaned down, her eyes bright with mischief. "Would you like to join me, Your Grace, or are you content to simply watch from the safety of the stable?" It was a challenge, a dare. And I found myself laughing for the first time in what felt like years. "Very well, but do not blame me when I fall off. It has been some time since I rode." I saddled my own horse, a black gelding named Midnight, and together we rode out across the estate. Isabeau urged Tempest into a gallop, and I struggled to keep pace, my muscles protesting after years of disuse. But God, it felt good to ride, to chase, to feel alive. We rode for hours, racing across fields and through forests, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and catch our breath. And somewhere during that ride, something changed between us. The wariness faded, the careful politeness dissolved, and what remained was something raw and real. Two people learning to be human again, to find joy in simple things, to trust that the world might hold more than just pain and loss. When we finally returned to the stables, both of us breathless and laughing, I realized that I was no longer merely protecting Isabel. I was falling in love with her. And judging by the way she looked at me, with eyes full of warmth and wonder, she might be falling too. But love, I was learning, was more complicated when it grew from trauma. The nightmares started 2 weeks later. I would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of Isabeau screaming, would rush to her room to find her thrashing in her bed, reliving the moment when the noose was placed around her neck. "It is all right," I would murmur, sitting beside her bed, holding her hand until the terror passed. "You are safe. I am here." Some nights she would calm quickly. Others she would weep for hours, her body shaking with sobs that seemed torn from the depths of her soul. "I thought I was stronger than this," she said, one particularly difficult night, her voice hoarse from crying. "I thought if I survived, if I escaped, the fear would end. But it is still there, Dorian. It is always there, waiting in the dark." "You are stronger than this," I said firmly. "The nightmares do not make you weak. They make you human. You endured something no person should endure. Your mind is simply trying to process it. When will it stop? I do not know, but I will be here until it does." She looked at me then, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Why do you care so much? Truly?" "Because," I paused, choosing my words carefully, "because you remind me that survival is not the same as living, that simply existing is not enough. You could have let Barnabas's lies destroy you. You could have accepted your fate on that scaffold, but you fought. You survived. You are still fighting, even now. And that courage, that refusal to surrender, it inspires me. I do not feel courageous. Courage is not the absence of fear, Isabeau. It is continuing forward despite it." She reached out and took my hand, threading her fingers through mine. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Autumn arrived, painting the estate in shades of amber and crimson. Isabeau's nightmares grew less frequent, and slowly, So slowly, I almost did not notice, she began to heal. She started helping Mrs. Pemberton manage the household, organizing the linen closets, overseeing the kitchen garden, directing the staff with a quiet efficiency that surprised us all. "You have a gift for this," I told her one evening as we reviewed the household accounts together. "Perhaps you should consider becoming a housekeeper yourself." She laughed. "Is that your way of trying to employ me, Your Grace?" "It is my way of acknowledging that you are far more capable than you give yourself credit for." I had to be capable. My stepfather made certain of that. After my mother died, I ran his household from the age of 14. Cooked, cleaned, managed the accounts. He was too drunk most days to care, and someone needed to ensure the roof did not cave in. What happened to him? He drank himself to death 3 years ago, left me with nothing but debts and a reputation as the daughter of a drunkard. Moving to Thornfield was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, she shrugged, instead, I witnessed a murder and became the village witch. That is a rather unfortunate turn of events. Indeed, she smiled wryly. But it led me here, to Ashmore, to you. So perhaps it was not entirely unfortunate after all. Our eyes met, and I felt the air between us shift, become charged with something unspoken, something dangerous. "Isabeau, I know what you were going to say," she interrupted gently. "That we should wait, that I need more time to heal, that I cannot trust my own feelings yet. And you are probably right. But Dorian," she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper, "what if we are both overthinking this? What if the truth is simply that we care for each other, that we have found something rare and precious in the midst of darkness? Why must we deny it? Because I do not want to hurt you, because I am terrified that I am using you to ease my guilt about Edmund, because—" I broke off, frustrated. "Because I do not trust myself to know the difference between love and desperation." "Then let me decide," she said. "Let me choose whether I wish to take this risk. I am not a child, Dorian. I am a woman who has survived hell. I think I can handle the risk of falling in love with you. And if you regret it, then I will have learned something about myself. But I would rather risk regret than spend my life wondering what might have been." She stood and crossed to where I sat, taking my face in her hands. "I am not asking for forever. I am not asking for promises. I am only asking if you feel this too, this connection between us, this sense that we were meant to find each other." I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of her palms against my cheeks. "Yes, I feel it." "Then let us see where it leads. Please." I opened my eyes and looked at her, truly looked at her. Saw not the victim I had saved, but the woman who had saved herself, who had fought and survived and refused to be broken. "Very well," I said quietly, but slowly. "We proceed slowly, giving ourselves space to be certain." "Slowly," she agreed, and kissed me. This time, the kiss was different, deeper, full of promise and possibility. I pulled her into my lap, and she came willingly, her arms winding around my neck, her body fitting against mine as though we had been designed for each other. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I woke in your arms at the inn," she confessed. "I have wanted to do it since I saw you refuse to cower on those gallows," I replied. "You were magnificent, even with a noose around your neck." "I was terrified." "You were both. That is what made it magnificent." We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, learning the shape and feel of this new thing between us. And when she finally returned to her own room, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hope and fear warring in my chest. I loved her. God help me, I loved her. I only prayed I was worthy of that love. We courted slowly, carefully, like two people learning to walk after long illnesses. Isabeau would take my arm during our walks through the estate. I would read to her in the evenings, and she would rest her head on my shoulder. We would steal kisses in empty hallways, brief and sweet, each one a small rebellion against the darkness we had known. Mrs. Pemberton noticed, of course, but she said nothing, only smiled knowingly when she caught us holding hands in the library. 3 months after Isabeau's arrival, I received a letter from Father Nathaniel. Barnabas Ashford had been tried and convicted of his brother's murder. He had been hanged the previous week on the same gallows where Edmund had died. "Justice," Father Nathaniel wrote, "has finally been served, but I suspect it brings little comfort. The dead remain dead, and we are left to carry our regrets." I showed the letter to Isabeau. She read it silently, then folded it carefully and handed it back. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Hollow," I admitted. "I thought I would feel vindicated, relieved, but instead I just feel empty. Edmund is still gone. Barnabas's death does not bring him back." "No," Isabeau agreed, "but perhaps that is the point. Justice is not about resurrection. It is about acknowledgement, about saying that what was done was wrong, and that there are consequences. Your brother's name has been cleared. That matters, Dorian, even if it does not heal the wound." She was right, of course, and slowly, over the following weeks, I felt something in my chest begin to unclench. The guilt did not disappear. I suspected it never would, but it became bearable, became something I could live with. Isabeau and I continued to grow closer. She became the mistress of Ashmore in all but name, managing the household, corresponding with tenants, even advising me on estate matters with a shrewdness that surprised my steward. "She has a head for figures," he told me approvingly, "and a gift for seeing solutions I would never have considered. You should marry her, Your Grace." "I am considering it," I admitted, and I was. But I wanted to be certain, wanted to know that we were choosing each other not out of trauma or convenience, but out of genuine love. The answer came on a winter evening 6 months after Isabeau's arrival. We were sitting before the fire in the library, reading companionably, when she suddenly closed her book and looked at me. "I have been thinking," she said. "A dangerous occupation." She smiled. "Indeed, but I have a question for you, and I need you to answer honestly." "Very well." If we had met under different circumstances, if there had been no gallows, no murder, no trauma, would you still love me? I set my own book aside and considered the question carefully. "I do not know," I said finally, "because I cannot separate who you are from what you have endured. Your strength, your resilience, your refusal to be broken, all of that was forged in the fire of your suffering. If we had met at some society ball, with you dressed in silk and me and my duke's finery, we might have danced once and never spoken again." "That is what I feared," she said quietly. "But," I continued, "the same is true of me. If you had met me 3 years ago, before Edmund's death, I would have been a different person. Shallow, self-absorbed, content to coast through life on privilege and indifference. You would not have loved that man. You would have found him boring. So we are products of our pain. We are products of how we responded to our pain. Some people break and never heal. Some people become bitter and cruel. But you, I reached out and took her hand. You became fierce, compassionate, unwilling to let darkness have the final word. And that is who I love. Not the victim, the survivor. the woman who chose to live when death seemed easier. She was crying now, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. I tried not to, told myself it was gratitude or dependence, but it is not. It is love, pure and simple. And I want to spend my life with you, if you will have me. "Are you proposing to me?" I asked, a smile tugging at my lips. "I suppose I am. I realize it is unconventional." I kissed her to stop the flow of words, kissed her with all the love and hope and desperate gratitude I felt for this impossible woman who had stumbled into my life and changed everything. "Yes," I said when we finally broke apart. "Yes, I will marry you. Today, tomorrow, whenever you wish. Yes to all of it." She laughed through her tears. "Perhaps we should wait until we can arrange for a proper ceremony. I would like Father Nathaniel to perform it." "Then we shall wait, but not too long. I have spent enough of my life hesitating. I will not hesitate in this." We were married 6 weeks later in the small chapel on the Ashmore estate. Father Nathaniel traveled from Thornfield to perform the ceremony, and Mrs. Pemberton wept shamelessly throughout. Isabeau wore a simple gown of ivory silk with wildflowers woven into her dark hair. She was breathtaking. And when Father Nathaniel pronounced us husband and wife, when I kissed my bride before God and the handful of witnesses we had gathered, I felt something I had not felt since Edmund's death. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Epilogue. 5 years later. The gallows in Thornfield Square had been torn down. Isabeau and I stood where they had once stood, our hands linked, watching as the village children played in the open space. A market was being constructed, stalls for farmers and craftsmen, a place for community rather than death. "It seems fitting," Isabeau said softly, "that something good should grow where so much pain occurred." "You suggested it," I reminded her, convinced the magistrate that Thornfield deserved a fresh start. We all deserve fresh starts. We had returned to Thornfield for the dedication of the market, at Father Nathaniel's request. The villagers had been wary at first. Old suspicions die hard. But Isabeau had won them over through patience and grace. She had established a school for girls in the village, funded by the Ashmore estate. She had convinced me to forgive the debts of several struggling families. And slowly, gradually, Thornfield had begun to heal. "They still call you the Duke's witch, you know," I told her with a smile. "I know, but now it is said with affection rather than fear. I will take what I can get." Our son, Edmund, named for my brother, was being watched by Mrs. Fraxon. Pemberton, back at Ashmore. He was 2 years old, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn chin. Isabeau was pregnant again, though we had not yet shared the news publicly. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Marrying me? Taking on this life?" "Never," she said fiercely. "Do you?" "Not for a single moment." Father Nathaniel approached, leaning heavily on his walking stick. He was frailer now, his face more lined, but his eyes were still bright with intelligence and kindness. "A good turnout," he observed, gesturing to the crowd gathered for the dedication. "Thornfield is changing, thanks to you both." "Thanks to you," Isabeau corrected. "You were the one who refused to let me die, who believed the truth mattered more than convenience. I did what any priest should do. But you," he looked at us both, "you have done something far more difficult. You have chosen to forgive, to return to a place that wronged you and offer it grace. That is the truest form of strength." "We had good teachers," I said, meeting the old priest's eyes. He smiled. "Then my work here is complete. Though I suspect I will be called upon to baptize another Blackwell grandchild soon." Isabeau laughed. "You are far too observant, Father." "It is my calling." He blessed us both, then moved off to mingle with the villagers. As the sun began to set, painting the square in shades of gold and amber, Isabeau turned to me. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being the man who whispered, 'Bring the priest,' instead of turning away. For saving me. For loving me. For giving me a life I never imagined I could have." "You saved yourself," I said. "I merely cleared the path." "Then we saved each other, and that is perhaps the most beautiful thing of all." She was right. We had saved each other, not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through the simple, daily choice to show up, to be present, to believe that the other was worth fighting for. As we walked back toward our carriage, I thought about the man I had been 5 years ago, broken, guilty, convinced that I was beyond redemption. And I thought about the man I was now, a husband, a father, someone who had learned that salvation does not come from forgetting our failures, but from refusing to let those failures define us. The gallows were gone, but the lessons they had taught remained. That justice matters, that courage is found in the smallest acts of defiance, that love, real love, is not about perfection, but about choosing to stand together in the face of darkness, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is whisper, "Bring the priest," and demand that the world stop long enough to hear the truth, even when that truth terrifies us, especially then.